Hey everyone, welcome to this interview series. It's all about unraveling. I'm so excited to have my friend Marlo Nikkila here. How long have we known each other? When did we meet in Hawaii?
I was counting that last night. I think it's been at least 7 or 8 years.
So I started a meetup group
Mhm.
7 or 8 years ago in Hawaii. And I remember when you joined and you had that photo of, I think you were sitting with like a globe. And
Oh
it
yeah.
was one of those like divine moments. People talk about these, and until you experience them, you think that they're like a bunch of crap. But it's like your picture just like glowed on the screen. And I was like, I can't wait to meet this person. um, so Marlo and I have known each other for a long time, and we have walked through a lot of different life together. And Marlo is somebody that I adore, not only because she's an amazing person and friend, but because she has this presence she just embodies peace and flow and gentleness and positivity, but not in that gross, like polished positivity way. It's like just part of your being. It's just part of how you consciously choose to engage with life. So I'm so excited to share you with everybody. If you could just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do, that would be great.
Oh yeah. I'm just so grateful for the meetup group that you created and just the friendship that has blossomed all these years. Like I just feel really honored to be part of your life. And I guess a little bit about me is I now have my husband and I have created a small intimate retreat space in our home, so I can really hold space for people who are ready to really come back to their pure essence of who they are and to practice being and to really master surrender and in a very magical um, I got unicorn energy going on, very magical way, so that it's also this lighter, playful way of being and navigating life.
Yeah, your space is amazing. I've only seen pictures of it, but I can't wait to come.
I know it's ready for you.
So you host your own retreats and you host other retreats.
Right now I will co-lead a retreat or we'll do day events, but that's one thing I got really clear about. We did have other people host them here, but that was kind of like until I got my stuff going and realizing that's not what I'm here for. Or, I mean, the space wants to be shared, so there's ways to do that, but I'm not here to host other people's retreats. There's enough places in the world for
Yeah,
them to do that. This is really a potent space for transformation, and not all retreats offer that. So,
that's true.
mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for these interviews, what I'm wanting to do is kind of a mix of talking about some of the moments that I went through that are in the Unravel book and also not. So it's throughout that whole period of my life after a traumatic loss, dealing with the PTSD, the grief, the healing. And Marlo was somebody who was already in my life.
Mhm.
And right after my loss, so he passed away just before Christmas and we buried him right after Christmas. And I remember coming home, like it was this horrible, exhausting experience to be in Hawaii where I got the news, come home and go straight to Missouri to his memorial and funeral and to face his family and to go through all of that. And I remember coming home finally just before the new year and just like, I was so raw and I was in such a really challenging, difficult space. And I was already noticing how many people um, were kind of distancing from me. And I don't think that that's always a conscious choice. I think it's like, it's fear of not knowing what to say. And all I think I had posted was I experienced a sudden loss and that I was going to be offline while I was dealing with that. And I don't know that I even had the expectation that people would reach out to me, but I was noticing that people weren't, that it was kind of like this uncomfortable thing. Like you could just kind of feel that in the energy around me that people didn't want to deal with it. And I don't remember how I told you what had happened or if you had just seen it on Facebook, but I do remember not long after getting back, Marlo sent me a text And I don't remember if it was a long text exchange, but at the heart of it was this gentle, genuine, like, would it be okay if I called you? And I remember crying about that before we even talked, because I didn't believe that anybody would want to sit with me in that pain, in that space. And I remember getting on the phone with you, and I feel like you were on a road trip, like you might have been in the car, but I think I don't remember the conversation other than I remember like a lot of rambling about what was going on and what I was feeling and what had happened in the trip and the memorial, and just crying, and you just being there with me. And that was such a gift. It was a gift that very few people gave me, people who had been in my life before. And that's something that it's surprising who shows up for us and who falls away, and more people than you expect fall away or don't show up at all. And so I would love if you could share a little bit about that from the perspective of being somebody witnessing someone you love going through something hard. Like, was it an uncomfortable thing to reach out? Like, what was your process around that? Because I think it's hard for people to know what to do in those situations. And I don't know that you did, but you handled it so perfectly.
Yeah. It just brought tears to my eyes, just you, because it took me right back to that moment. And we were on a road trip. We went to the East Coast. We had just moved to Portland. That was our first winter. And over the Thanksgiving, my husband and I went to a 10-day meditation retreat. And so every time I've done that, I just have landed in a more deeper grounded way. And so I think that was part of what allowed me to be present in a way that I don't know that I could have otherwise. Like there was a capacity there that was expanded. And so on the road trip, I think I saw it on Facebook, and I just love you so deeply, and to know that you're hurting and I couldn't physically be there. I was like, what can I do to show you that I love you and just to be? And I just wanted you to be held, and so I also know that I sensed that oftentimes when we're going through something, and maybe this is because of how I would want to be held too, is that being bombarded with all these phone calls also didn't feel good to me. And so I think that's why I asked if it was okay for me to call you, because I wanted you to know that, one, you didn't have to answer if I called, and two, I didn't want you to feel bad about it. And I just, felt like that was something I could do.
Yeah. And it was huge. And I would love for us to kind of explore, I don't know if we've ever explored this, but it's just inherent to who you are, that ability to just be. Like, you were so amazing at just being. Like, I remember in Hawaii when we would hang out, even when you were stressed about something, your energy was so much more peaceful and calm than anything I'd ever experienced. So you like naturally have this ability to just be, and to kind of sink in and to hold space. And I think that's an important message for anyone who is hurting or has somebody that they love that is hurting, is that you don't have to do anything.
Right.
I know that you said words back to me, but I remember never feeling like you were trying to fix it or make me feel better, or like you were prying. You just were like there for whatever came out of me. And I'm sure it was rambly, because I was already starting to lose my memory, and so much had happened, and I didn't know how to talk about it out loud to people. But I'm curious what you think it takes, how you would describe to other people that ability to just be and to hold space for somebody.
Yeah. So I feel like it requires me to do my own work so that I am not triggered by other people's stuff, because that way it can be like this clean space where I'm not having to protect myself. I'm not having to, like you said, fix or provide solutions. And there are times when I offer different options, or, like engaging in conversation, and it's not like I'm just sitting there doing nothing. Like there is like some energetic exchange. But I think it's also just letting the person, well, actually, you know, for me with you, and what made it really easy, because I think I was able to do that with you in a time I didn't even know that I was doing that, is that I felt your essence, and that has stayed the same throughout this entire journey. And so I could just tap into knowing who you are and letting you be in this experience, knowing that you are perfect and whole and that you are going to move through it in the best way possible. And so I think it's just also trusting that there's more, but it's also not paste, you know, like making it not significant with what was going on, but just knowing this isn't, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Like it's not, there's more. And it was like holding space for all of it. And I think that's the other piece with peace, is that it's not getting rid of or shifting energy really quick because you're out of resisting something. It's like letting it be seen, let it be felt, so that it could actually move through you. And I now know this, where, you know, when we experienced that together, I don't think I had the awareness around it. It was just something that apparently I was doing fairly naturally, like even in Hawaii, like you mentioned, like I was feeling the stress, but I'm glad to hear that it like exude. So I think there's, letting the space for all of it to come up, because there's no resistance and there's nothing wrong, even though it feels horrible.
Yeah. I love that. And something about our friendship that I know we've reflected on a lot of different times is that we just allow each other to be wherever we are. Like there's no expectation. And one of the chapters that Marlo shows up in is the Portland chapter, where I'm starting to bump up against other people's expectations and other people's disappointment and me not being able to show up how I had before. And I have never, even before the loss, through it and to this day, I've never felt that way with you. Like I've never felt like there's stuff I can't talk to you about. I've never felt like, well, I'm talking to Marlo, so I need to be in this state and I need to touch on these topics. It's like we have always been able to just show up and be wherever we're at. And I think that is a huge reason, in addition to you reaching out the way you did and holding me, but why our relationship has survived so many different things. Like I want to talk a little bit about stuff you've been through too. But even we've gone long stretches without talking,
Right. Yeah.
Unintentionally, but there's never this feeling of like Marlo's going to be mad or Stephenie's going to be mad or I have to be a certain way when it's like we always get to just be, and that's such a gift in and of itself.
Yeah, I agree. I feel the same way in your presence too, Stephenie. Like I feel very seen and very like depth seen, you know, where it's just we just have this pure love for each other, and it can travel the distance. And
yeah. And I think that's a gift that people can give each other that they don't know how, like, especially in relationships, or like we want to fix each other. We want you to feel better. I want you to be happy. I want you to be healthy.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So I'm dealing with something right now with my sister. And what I've become very, very clear on is that along with those expectations comes codependency. Mm-hmm. And I'm no longer willing to play the game of codependency. And so I think that's where that entanglement can happen. And that's where the expectations and like come into play. And I feel like the more we do our own work, where we no longer have those, like I'm not relying on you for me to feel good.
Right.
You know, I'm not and I'm not making it like, oh, I wonder if Stephenie's mad at me because she hasn't reached out. You know, like I'm not needing that anymore. And there's times I go there, but it's so far and few between anymore, because I used to be that, where I would read into what other people were doing and making it about me. And it's like, not everything is about me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love like healthy relationships where we can be who we are and let the other person be who they are.
Yeah. I feel like I learned a lot. I don't know that I ever really thought about codependency before going through all of this or looking at my relationships that I was in. Um, and I'd love to hear how you define it. I'm sure there's like a legitimate definition of it, but the way I see it is it's roles based of I show up in this way so that you feel that way. And in return, you're going to show up in another way so that I feel, that is a dynamic of our relationship. It is not allowed to change.
Right. And that's what is happening with my sister. She sees that family has a very specific role and that you are there through the thick and thin. And I'm like, only if you have a relationship, you know? And so there's just, you know, and I was wanting a relationship and then it just, you know, kind of tanked. And I actually feel really good about like what's happening, even though she's said that I have failed as a sister and as an aunt. And I am like, you're right, I have, because your roles of me, I'm not fitting those.
Right.
So, and I see like what she's going through, but it's very role based and very, so much full of expectations. And that if you do this, then I'll feel better. Or if this happens, you know, like it's very conditional. Yeah. And the way I describe it too, in a lot of my retreats and just my online programs is that there's different dimensions. So it's very third dimensional, where it is tied, it's rigid, it's tied to expectations, conditions, and it just, it gets entangled. And then we play that dance. And then once you're no longer living in the third dimension, you're in the fourth and fifth, like you can still love them and you can still, but I realize I'm not here to fill those roles for her. And I'm not even here to be the one to help her move through that. Right now, I'm just the trigger.
Yeah.
And, being okay with someone being mad at me or really angry at me. I actually feel really peaceful and calm around it and know that it'll work out how it works out. So
I think that's a really key thing to touch on. And I went through so much of that, of that untangling from all the roles and relationships and expectation and obligation, and going from feeling really shitty about letting people down and being a disappointment and not being who I was before to being at peace with it. Like, and I think that's a hard thing for people to grasp until they get there. It's not like, it almost sounds heartless. Like, how can you not care that your sister?
I know, I feel heartless with how I'm speaking about my sister, but there's so much love there. There's so much.
It's like when you're really present and you really have that state of non-attachment and you understand that things aren't personal. I think that's a really hard thing, of that things aren't personal, good or bad. Like, they're always a reflection of each individual person and how they feel and how they view the world. It's like you can have this duality in every given moment of like, you can feel love for somebody and know that you are never going to speak to them again. Like, you can feel sad because you know that they're hurting and they're being let down and you're not giving them what they need, and also not feel responsible for it. Like, It's really hard to hold both of those.
It is, until you understand that is just like, and maybe that because there's this underlying union, like that we're not separate. You know, It only is hard when we realize that we're separate. And so there's that moment of accepting and allowing the duality, but then realizing the duality turns to unity. So, and I think it comes with practice too, like anything. It's like the more I'm okay with disappointing people, and I'm not doing it on purpose or I want to disappoint people so I feel better. It's just like the more I allow myself to be true to me, the easier it becomes. But it doesn't, mean that it doesn't get uncomfortable. I mean, this is a couple, well, she's been my sister for a very long time, and I'm finally at this stage, you know? So, but I do feel that there is this deep sense of peace when you really allow all of that to exist at the same time and let it all be okay.
And when you're really aligned with, this is what's right for me right now, you can't be doing anything wrong. Yes, and this was something that was really hard for me to learn, the idea of consequences just being a thing that happens as a result of other things. Like, we assign the meaning of good or bad, right or wrong to them. It's like, if I make a decision that this is no longer right for me, it doesn't feel good, it's not nurturing, and I leave the friendship, the relationship, the job, the whatever, there's a consequence of that. And that's a normal thing that happens. That someone's going to have feelings, things are going to happen, things might be hard or easy, like, and it's, as long as you're honoring what's true for you and you're being as kind and considerate and caring as you can be, like, you're not doing anything wrong. But when other people start to have their feelings, we're like, oh my God, I'm a bad person.
Exactly. Oh yeah. And I was so sensitive to that. Like I was such a people pleaser. And because I'm so flowy, I can actually, go into like, what does the other person need more than what I need? And there becomes a place where we just become more sovereign in our own energy and confident and clear and clean within ourselves. That there's an image that I love so much, and I don't remember the story. I think it was in a book called True Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh, but it was a story about Buddha who there's another being who came in shooting poisonous arrows at him, and as soon as it entered his energy field, the arrows turned into flowers and just dropped. And so that's kind of how I now imagine, like, when things are kind of being directed at me, it's like, oh, those are just going to like turn into something beautiful and not hurt me. Like I don't feel like I'm and this goes to my breast cancer story, where I realized that nothing can hurt me as a divine energetic being. And so it just kind of removed, and I'd still get stuck in the humanness, that we're in, but it's just like at the depth of knowing, like, even with breast cancer, nothing can hurt me.
Yeah. And I would love for you to share as much, but more of your breast cancer journey. It was a hard thing. Not as hard as I think it would have been with other people, because you had such a strong sense of like, I'm good. I know I know how to take care of me. I'm going to come through. Like, you had a really rooted energy and a clear intention of what you wanted to come from the whole experience. But as a friend, it was very much like, oh my God, I need to go move in and take care of my friend. Like, I don't want, it's that same feeling of like, I must come to you and hold you. But part of why I wanted to do this series is because we all go through such different things that we're going along and life is fine. And all of a sudden something happens, big or small, that causes us to kind of rethink and reorient to our own lives. So I'd love for you to share your journey and experience.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I had just finished my first retreat here. So I was really in a magical space. And I had just had, was going through menopause, and my naturopath suggested I get a mammogram because I was going to go on these bioidentical hormones and just to have a baseline. So I did that before my retreat, and then they found something, and so I scheduled a biopsy after my retreat. And this is also a time where we're doing a lot of renovations, and my place wasn't even done for the first retreat, but the people who were coming, like, it was just part of the journey. Like, hey, you don't have to wait until you're complete or perfect to move forward. So I loved that. And then the fire happened that was like encroaching on our property. And so there's a lot happening. And then each one allowed me to go deeper into surrender. So like the fire coming and like maybe potentially burning down our house, and nothing was or the new upgrades hadn't been insured, which were over $100,000. And it's like, we could lose this. We could lose all of this. And I just went into like, I'm okay. Even if that happens, I'm okay. The dream will still exist. We'll be okay. We'll navigate whatever comes. And then a few days after that, that's when I found out I had breast cancer. So it just allowed me to like even more. And I will say, like, I was in shock, because I was like, oh, nothing bad happens to me. And I'm always healthy. I'm vegan. Like, there's all this stuff. And then it's, came back with breast cancer, and it was a shock. I'm like, what, me? Like, how does that happen? And then there was a sense of like, I don't want to tell anybody, because they're going to think that veganism is not the answer. Like, there's all these things of like being this role model of how, and I'm being positive. I do, all this stuff. It's like, if I can get breast cancer, that means anybody can get breast cancer. And I think there's some freedom in that. It's like, oh, it's not discriminating, like it can show up for anyone. So after my initial like shock and fear, because of all the practices and just how I've been kind of showing up in my life, this allowed me, it allowed me to deepen my practice. But what I really believe now is that it was a way for me to live my practice. And I remember saying, I am going to choose how I'm going to move through this. And it's going to be with a lot of peace and a lot of magic. Like I am so open to miracles happening and to just like seeing how this plays out. And I made a commitment to myself that I was not going to make a decision out of fear, because so much of the cancer culture and experience is urgency and fear. It's all wrapped together. And the other message I got was, it's time to receive in a way I've never received before.
Yeah.
And so I knew I needed to share. I needed to put out there saying, okay, my biopsy, at this point, I still couldn't say I had breast cancer. I said the biopsy came back with cancer. And that I made it very clear to people, because one of the reasons I also didn't want to share is I didn't want all their worry and all this other energy projected onto me. So I just said that I'm okay. And the thing that you can do for me, because I knew people would want to do something, the thing you can do for me right now is to not worry and to see me as healthy and whole.
Yeah.
And I have heard from several people that was really powerful for them to imprint that just even on themselves, so that because when we see somebody as broken or sick or unhealthy, like it changes the energy around it. So through that journey, I mean, I could go into more, but I'll just wrap it up in saying that my willingness to be with the cancer, like I didn't need it to go away. I didn't need to resist it. There's a lot of healing that happened just harmonizing me with Western medicine. And also knowing when it was time to unplug, like to really get to this clean decision. And so when chemo was on the table, I mean, it came on the table twice. I really had to sit with the fear of losing my hair, wanting to show up in my business, and then to have this happen to derail it. There was just a lot. And then me having to rethink, like, oh, is veganism the thing? And do I, like, there's just so many things that had to show up, but I was able to like lean into each one. So I'll just share the story about the chemo, losing my hair. That was a big thing, because I didn't realize how much of my identity was related to how I look, or, like, I don't know, it's just interesting. And so I stood in front of the mirror with a hat on to make it look like I was bald. And I really spent time with myself as bald Marlo and said, are you willing to still show up even here? And when it went from a head yes to like a heart yes, the fear went away, because now it didn't own me. It was no longer a filter that I was going to make a decision from. So I did that with every fear that showed up for me on doing chemo, not doing chemo, and finally got to this place of like, oh, I don't need to do chemo. Like, it just doesn't make sense, and that's not my path. And so it was just really clean and clear, because I spent the time unraveling what was there that was in the way of me making that decision. And so 4 months later, I was done. Like, I didn't do radiation, I didn't do chemo. And the part that I really want to bring out, because I don't think this, when I say, I don't know if it lands, but people would look at that story and saying, oh, being with breast cancer means that you'll be cancer free. I was being with breast cancer regardless of what the outcome was. This just happens to be the outcome. I was still okay if I made peace with death. I made peace with all the different aspects, so that none of that was fueling my choice. And so I'm grateful that it's turned out this way, but it's not a guarantee. And I wasn't doing it so that I was healed, or that I was being with it purely as it was.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like, I
Yeah, you
don't.
touched on so many things I want to talk more about. I don't know if I'll have time for them all, but that leads to the first one of surrender.
Oh, yes. Which is my favorite chapter in your book, is taking the feet off the wall.
Yeah, and there was that moment for me where it was like, okay, like my brain doesn't work. Even after I started doing the healing work, it still didn't work like it did before. My business was failing, and it was a deep surrender and making peace with, if I lost everything. Like, you really have to sit with that. And one of my favorite books that I talk about all the time, Last Word on Power, it calls it dying before going into battle. Like, that's what samurai warriors do. You make peace with your greatest fear, the worst outcome that could happen. And when you really do that, and it's not just like that, spiritual bypassing, like saying the mantras, but not like, when you really feel it, like I really hit that point after that trip to Zion of like, okay, I am going to surrender to wherever this is meant to take me. And if I lose everything, I lose everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not easy.
It's not easy, but man, when you can be in that energy, it is the most beautiful space I've ever been.
Yeah.
Because again, I knew, and I know who I am as a divine being in this human body. And I don't always remember, but when I can tap into that, like it's accessible in a way that it hadn't been before.
Yeah.
So I look at my cancer experience as an initiation. And it has, and I'm so grateful for the depth that I was willing and able to go,
Yeah.
and to allow myself to receive the love and support from friends and family, and just, it's powerful when we allow that to happen. And I also want to say that I don't know that everyone has to go through such a trying time to experience surrender or experience this freedom. And because I feel like people also have a very different understanding around surrender than I do. It's not a giving up. It's not an acquiescing. It's really a way of being present. And then for me, it's also letting go, but letting go of control, letting go of our identity, letting go of resistance. So it's not letting go of emotions so much, because that is just another way of resisting the emotion. In a way, it's more of an integration that I think happens. But then the piece that I don't think a lot of people understand around surrender is that it's also letting in all the goodness and all the support and all the love. And just, I see it as like this net that we just get to like lean into and just allow our whole being to show up.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I navigate and play with surrender. It's that it's not just a letting go that I think a lot of people think of.
Yeah, I think a lot of people confuse it with giving up. Like you said, like I'm just gonna give up, and it's so different. The frequency of it, the energy of it, what you're able to create because of it, it's very different.
Yeah. The other one comes from more of a victim energy, and this is a very empowered, very courageous, very trusting. You're trusting in not only your capacity to hold it, but just trusting that you, like, even seeing the universe as separate as than ourselves is still a victim energy, because we're saying this power is outside of ourselves that's bigger than us. And it's like, we are that. And so that's something I'm still practicing and still like playing with, is that there is no separation.
Yeah. And also what I found in the surrendering, it forces you, like you said, to let go of parts of yourself. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting a weird feedback.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Like it's the death to the ego, death to, for me, it was letting go of a lot of all of these coping mechanisms. So one of my favorite sayings from a client and mentor is like, we think we have free will, but really we're being run by our subconscious programming. And when you go through something And I agree. We don't all have to go through these really challenging chapters or these big life transitions or get an illness to have these experiences. But for a lot of people, that's what it takes. It's this like cracking open, this being forced to open your eyes and wake up and see that all the ways you've been coping and all the ways that you've been being run by your subconscious programming and beliefs and fears, and you have to let them go. Like that's part of the surrender process of like shedding all of these layers and just like it that was terrifying at first for me, but also like the freedom that comes with it is unlike any freedom you've ever experienced before.
It's true freedom.
Yeah. And true peace. Like we might experience moments of peace before that, but when you've I let go of so many attachments, and especially after the swallowing stuff, when it was like my life and health literally depended on me living in alignment and speaking my truth, the freedom, like it's just the peace, it was amazing. And it was a horrible and terrifying way to get there, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Exactly. Yeah, it's powerful because then you become really clean in the energy. And it's like there's almost like you just can't go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one other thing, I'm gonna get this little light dot off my face. There we go. One of the things that you talked about that I thought was really important was being well resourced. So not in terms of even just having people or tools, but within yourself and your own practices. Someone asked me recently, can you ever really prepare for grief and trauma? And I said yes and no. There are still things that I could go through that would bring me to my knees all over again. And yet I remember, and I wrote about this moment after I got the news of his passing. My mom finally got me out of bed, sent me to the bathroom, made me drink some water and eat some grapes. And I remember coming back out of the bathroom. It was the first time I had been upright since I got the news, and her coming at me with this look of sadness and worry, and her grabbing me by the arms and saying, like, you have to be okay. And my thought was, like, it had never occurred to me that I wouldn't be. Not that I didn't think it was going to be horrible. It already was horrible and overwhelming and awful. And it wasn't like I thought, well, I'm going to go home and everything's going to be fine. Like I knew it was going to suck for a while. But when she said that to me, it was this moment of like, well, of course I'll be okay. Because I had done so much personal growth work already. I was resourced. I understood, like, things happen. I felt like it was just never a question for me. And I would love for you to speak a little bit to that, like being well resourced and what you think specifically helped you.
Wow, that's a deep question. So I think what helped me was I'm so grateful that I had that retreat, because it's like, wow, if that's the only retreat I ever do, I feel complete because it was that powerful and I actually received something from it. And so I think there's things that happen in place that we have no idea how it's there to support us. And I also think just this, it was just years of building my capacity and trust in myself. But also I think it was this openness that allowed the right people and, like things I didn't even know I needed. I did no research on cancer when I heard about it, because I didn't want to be influenced by other people's experience. So there's a part of me that needed to like just stay within what was happening for me. And I also tuned in. So like the first surgeon I went to, even though she was a Reiki master and a yoga teacher, like it was just like, okay, you're going to have a surgery and then you're going to have chemo for a year. And then this is going to happen. I'm like, wait a minute, what about like how powerful our brain is and the energy work and all this kind of stuff. She's like, oh, that's just there to support the whole breast cancer stuff. I'm like, So I left really defeated. And and so it was just taking time. I gave myself space, even though there was all this urgency that was placed on me. Like, you need to make this decision. We're going to get you in next week. And I'm like, whoa. Like, so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think I slowed things down so that I could actually be present with what was happening. And I also read a book by Chris Carr, Crazy Sexy Cancer.
Yeah.
And there was a part in there where she said that you are the CEO of Save Your Own Ass. And so it empowered me. I'm like, oh, I get to decide who and what happens to me. So it was just remembering that I get to also decide. And so I started seeing a naturopath who then led me to this beautiful surgeon who, like I just let myself be part of the experience, but with an open heart, but also just trusting and paying attention. I think paying attention is a big piece, but presence is huge. Anytime I noticed I was resisting something, I spent time with it. I also knew that people like to fight and battle and, do all these things with cancer. And that's not my energy. That's not who I am. And so I think doing things that were in alignment for me was really important. So I don't know if that's answering your question, because it was such a big question.
No, it is. Like, what I hear is a lot of self-awareness, the ability to be present, understanding surrender, like, and also having lots of tools that you could use and people, and understanding all of that. But I would say that it was probably the same for me. I had never been through anything that awful. And yet I just kind of knew there was nothing else to do but to be in it.
Yeah. It's almost like, and this is going to sound kind of strange, but there was a point where all the techniques and all the modalities like left. Because I could do energy medicine, yoga every day. Like, I felt there's a lot of shoulds I should do. And there's a lot of times, especially in these like cancer, like there's another woman who like had a list of all these things she was doing in her day to help her heal from cancer. And I'm not saying that wasn't necessary or important, but I'm like, that alone is very stressful. And we think we're having to do something to fix us or to make something go away. And there's a simplicity that I think happens in these moments when we allow ourselves to be with what is.
Yeah.
And it's a scary place. Our ego does not want us to do that.
No. And it is like the death to the ego. Like, I remember all those moments where I was like breaking down, and it always seems to happen on like the kitchen floor or the bathroom floor, right? Like, there's something about the floor that is soothing when you're falling apart. But I really believed, even though intellectually I'm sure I knew that crying wouldn't kill me, I really did not think I would survive those moments. Like, the grief was too overwhelming and intense. And it's like my brain, my body, my being didn't know how to handle it. And I had never had to go that deep into my own emotions and experiences, that I really didn't think I was going to I would disappear. Right. Which is totally illogical. That's not how it works, but that's how it felt. And I think because I already had some experience and practice with being present and surrender, because none of it was a conscious choice of like, I'm going to go into this cry fest and do my work and be present with it. It was just like, there was nothing else to do but that. And I just knew it was intuitive, instinctual, that like, this is what happens now. And then you come out the other side of these things and experience life and the situation and yourself and the world around you in a totally different way that you never could have before, if you're not willing to just like drop into it and really be with it. Yeah. And it's like, if we allow ourselves to be with even like the shadow side of our personality, or like what we're moving through, like, until we do that, it owns us. Yeah. And we will always make decisions in reaction to it. And so for me, the free will comes from, how do I respond? How do I choose to be? Yeah. Do I let myself be in it? So it's a really beautiful, I don't even want to call it a skill, but in some ways it is. The more we allow ourselves to do that, it just builds our trust and our capacity to hold. And to me, like, peace holds it all. Yeah. And it's letting
everything be seen, to be witnessed, to know that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have fear. It's okay to fight. It's, like there's no resistance to it, but then you get to choose differently.
Yeah.
Because you've been clean, like there's just more of a clean energy there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about this all day, but to kind of close us out, what is one thing that you would leave people with? Anyone who is going through a challenging chapter or a big life transition, who's feeling turned upside down inside their own life, they're in that reorienting process. Like, what is one thing that you would want to leave them with?
There's a couple of things, and I guess I think it would depend on what exactly and where the person is, because if you can get outside in nature, I feel like that is so incredibly healing, and like it aligns you and it attunes you to a different energy where you're not having to do anything other than just being in nature. But I also know that depending upon where you are, that can seem like way too much, like to even get off the couch to go do that, because I've also been there. Breathing, just allowing some slow, deep breaths would be a really simple thing, and just honoring where you are and not even making that wrong.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of practice, there's so many people have judgments around what's right or wrong, good or bad. And I think that keeps us stuck longer than we need to be. Yeah. But somehow getting some energy moving, I think, is good. And just breathing can help with that. Even if you breathe in your nose and exhale out your mouth, just doing that, I think, can really be of support. And then the other thing that's just coming up for me is just even having your hand on your forehead, because that helps with like just integrating and letting trauma move through. Yeah. So a lot of times when we're feeling like that, we're like, putting our so it's just a natural response, but even just doing it on purpose, you're self-soothing yourself. And I don't know that we know how to do that very well either.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those are great. They seem so basic and simple, but they're so powerful.
Yeah. And if I had more ways, that's just what showed up. And again, I think it's going to depend for each person. If there's a presence that you can bring to whatever you're experiencing, I think that is probably the thing that no matter what you're going through, because oftentimes we don't want to be present with what we're going through. And so we try to avoid it or resist it or push it down or whatever that is. So.
And finally, where can people find you to play with you, be with you, learn from you, all of that?
Well, my website is marlonikkila.com, but I also have this really beautiful interactive Facebook group. And then obviously, people can come play in person in a retreat. I have 3 or 4 a year that are here. And that's all on the website too. So thanks for letting me share that.
Of course. Yeah. Check out everything she does. I don't know what the new name is going to be, but your planner is also amazing.
Thank you. Yes, I forget about that. Yeah. And I love your book, and I am so, so excited for your story to be shared. And there's so many gems in there. And I mentioned my favorite chapter, but there's a lot that I also received from reading it. And if you want to have more conversation around that, I'm happy to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and letting me share you with everyone. And go find Marlo, marlonikkila.com. I'll put a link below this so people can find you. But thank you. I love you so much.
Love you so much.